very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
You're in violation of secure communication procedures, Condor.
So we just went ahead and fixed the glitch.
There is no America. There is no democracy.
Our fifth objective, a new world order.
There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West.
Right-wing conspiracy.
What do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin?
A new world order.
Thank you for plugging in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
Well, just a second there, Professor. We fixed the glitch.
I'm your host, Professor Thomas Henry Horan.
He reads everything.
Hello there, my bountiful, bodacious beatards. You better bet your bippies he reads everything. Look at some of this. First of all, from the News I Can Use department. Local TV in Florida. There have been a total of 3 reported alligator attacks in the last 7 days across Central Florida. Experts are chiming in with their tips on how to safely coexist with alligators. And this is it. Leave the motherfuckers alone. This is my favorite picture of an alligator. Nothing, there is nothing as far as the eye can see. Anyway, he's like, oh, what's that little thing? Nothing dares. All right, now, before we get into anything, let me clear this up. Hey, baby bull. Okay. Scientists say they have built a cell from scratch for the first time. No, they did not. But they did do something very interesting. But in order to understand what they did, you must understand certain things. So while we wait for people to get logged in here, let me just explain to you what they did and what it means. The thing about the evolution of life is it doesn't happen one step at a time. You don't, they go in their little laboratory and they take their little bottle of liquid and they zap it a couple times and they say, oh, look, there's the building blocks of life. Well, that's like saying, there's atoms everywhere. Here's the thingamabob. Scientists have reverse engineered the simplest bacteria they can find, which is not actually all that ancient. But there's a bacteria that lives in the ocean, and it's like 50% of the biomass on Earth or something. It's super simple. It eats all the detritus of all the dead bacteria and things, all the loose amino acids, things like that. It performs photosynthesis without chlorophyll. It's the simplest living thing that reproduces itself because viruses aren't considered living. They don't metabolize. Is this bacteria? It has about 130 some odd genes, which control about 1,300 distinct chemical processes that all have to happen, and they all have to happen on this thing has to be able to reproduce. It has to be able to change temperatures of its environment. It has to be able to change chemical composition of its environment. This is the simplest they can come up with. You strip away all the nucleic acids and things like this. What you get is a blob of jelly. Now, see, we have to talk about water, and you know nothing about water. That's the problem. You know nothing about water. For example, water is not a liquid. Water is not a liquid. Water is a fluid, but it is not a liquid in the sense that all the other known liquids are liquids. Liquid mercury, liquid cooking oil, gasoline, alcohol. They are liquids. This is not a liquid. Apart from that, but you need to know, this is rust. Hydrogen is a metal. Hydrogen is one of the alkaline metals. This is important. When it rusts, it doesn't absorb one molecule of oxygen. What happens is 2 hydrogens bond to one molecule, one atom of oxygen. So you get, and the thing that you got to understand is, they always show you, like in science class, they got this hard marble, they got this billiard ball, and the sticks, and you stick the hydrogen on there, and that's water. No, it is not. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is not a rigid thing like that. No molecule, no molecule is rigid unless they get locked into a crystal structure and they're kind of vibrating like this. They're not rigid. And water molecules aren't rigid at all. They clackety, 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 clack. Do you remember those things when, 50 years ago, they had this toy. It was 2 plastic balls on a string and a stick. And so the balls would swing back and forth like this as you wave this stick. Okay? You wave this stick and clackety, clackety, clack, because the 2 balls would come together like this. Clackety, 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 clack. And it took them off the market because they would explode. Remember those? That's what water does. Those 2 hydrogen atoms bounce back and forth, but it's not as symmetrical. It's an off triangle kind of thing. So it's bang, 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 which depends on its temperature. Water, uniquely enough, can absorb and emit heat in lots of different wavelengths, more than any other molecule, really. And it can store a lot of heat energy. But water, when it's doing these things, then it does other things that other liquids don't do. It kind of does a do-si-do with other water molecules. Now, when we talk about a fluid, when we talk about a liquid like this, we're talking about atoms that are not quite touching, but are very close to touching. It's kind of like throwing your kid into those big ball pits. So the water molecules are kind of small, and they're kind of slippery, and they slip off each other. But they're doing so much more than that. They're grabbing each other and flinging each other exactly like a square dance, exactly like a do-si-do. And while they're doing that, they can reach out and grab other molecules a little bit. This is all electromagnetic attraction, and slam them together, which can cause chemical reactions. Water can transport extra electrons, blah, 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 blah. Water is an organizing intelligence, far more than any other liquid. Without water, you don't get life. Without liquid water, you don't get life, and water is not a liquid. Water alone cannot create life, but it's very important in creating and maintaining the processes of life. It's not just a solvent that allows other molecules to come together. So one thing that can happen is lipids can form in like around volcanic vents. So if you go back to the primitive Earth and you've got water, there's no dry land yet. It hadn't separated yet. No continents have bunched up yet. So it's all covered with water, liquid water, which is not a liquid. It's chemically reacting in crazy ways. Other things happen. If you introduce 1 molecule of salt, which I know breaks down into 2 ions, I'm getting to that, into water, approximately 1 million water molecules around that, they reconfigure what they're doing, but not like in a locked way like a crystal. But it changes what they do. It's like a signal goes through the water. And if you have like just a tiny, tiny little chunk of like 12 molecules of salt or whatever, the nearest billion water molecules are reprogrammed. It has lots of other really crazy behaviors. Really crazy behaviors. And it has one of the most powerful surface tensions, and that's because between the air and the liquid water, there really is a membrane. There is a membrane of water molecules it's about 2 to 3 molecules deep, and it forms an elastic layer, and it sorts order from chaos. It is a form of intelligence. It's a dynamic layer. It evolves all the time. It opens up. But what it does is the hot molecules it allows to escape, and they gas. The cold molecules, it allows them to go in. Gravity's the force, but it's not just a filter. It's a dynamic membrane. It's very thin. It's only a couple molecules thick, and it's made of water. It's very important. That's a form of intelligence. The next form of intelligence is in the presence of these undersea volcanic vents, which still exist on Earth today, but they're a little more rare. I think they're a lot more rare. They form these elements can come together and they form, it takes about 110 total processes of 5 to 10 steps each of chemical reactions that have to take place to form lipids, which are fat molecules. And if you create a Tinker Toy set of the right kind of lipid molecules, they assemble themselves into a membrane, which can grow. A very simple cell membrane is just a couple of layers of lipids. It's a few layers, it's like a net. And they link together automatically. They self-assemble into a membrane under the right liquid water conditions. But what has to happen is, like a cell like this, the membrane has to swallow all 110 processes and lock out all of the destructive processes. And then you have a self-sustaining, as the lipids are broken down by contact with other chemicals in the seawater and the seawater itself, they are replaced. So this thing, and it can get successful enough to grow and pop and kind of swallow again and try to re-swallow. Because it's not just 110 processes, it's 110 times about 10 million. And this is going on at about a billion cycles per second inside one of these tiny subbacterial cells. But this all by itself cannot evolve genetics or metabolism. This is no metabolism, this is nothing. 110 processes. What has to happen next is you have to get some nucleic acids, and they have to come together just the right way, and you have a very limited time to make this happen. And the Earth is only 200 million years old or less, so it hasn't had time to form on Earth. They only form in the presence of very powerful ultraviolet light. So in the interstellar dust that has been circling this so-called solar system that's beginning to coalesce, and it's very thick, it's like a soup. Well, it's not as thick as a soup. But these little dust particles of what we would call clay on Earth and things like this, they form a different type of membrane. But it's a surface on which, under the presence, energized by very high levels of ultraviolet light, you get certain chemicals like ammonia to bond to the surface of this crystal. And in a predictable way, it's a pattern across these crystals, chunk, 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 and it will build up nucleic acids, but not a full strand of DNA. Now, this has to rain down into an acidic ocean that is volcanically active. And the crystal, the mineral crystal, has to be dissolved away and leave the nucleic acid, which will exist for a few seconds, depending on the conditions. And you have to have trillions of these things raining down every second if you're going to make this magic happen. So what these scientists have done, they did not build a cell from scratch. What she did was she took existing bacterial genes that we know of and these fat-producing processes that they've already narrowed it down to. Scientists have reverse engineered a bacteria that can go on 130 some odd genes. That's about 1,300 distinct chemical processes, and some of them are mind-bogglingly complex. When they show you these videos on the documentaries, one molecule plus one molecule, and it looks like an assembly line. It's a cloud where molecules are being assembled by different processes, and they're all operating in a cloud. And it's all going on billions of times a second. Billions of times a second. But in these early volcanic vents underwater with certain chemicals, and this environment has to change over time. But also, super high temperatures, you get the chimney effect. The water's mixing, the chemicals are mixing very rapidly, very rapidly, very rapidly. So how do you get to 130 distinct genes, plus a ribosome has to exist? A ribosome is a very complex molecular machine that actually does, that's a really cool machine. Plus the ATP system, which can exist in parts. What you're getting is, in every teaspoon of seawater around one of these vents, you have, I think, about 25 quintillion molecules of different kinds and sizes. And you have approximately 100 quintillion collisions per second among these molecules of all kinds of collisions happening in a very hot vent, very dense seawater, rich with chemicals of all kinds. You get about 100 quintillion collisions per second, which result in about 100 or 200 billion chemical reactions will take place. A very tiny percent of chemical reactions. Some of these are interesting chemical reactions. This is per second in a teaspoon. What has to happen is, to make a long story short, to go from this stage where you have bubbles of lipid which are swallowing processes and protecting them from the environment. The next stage in the membrane is it must allow food and energy to come in, and it must allow waste to go out, and it must divide on purpose and evenly duplicate the cell. This happens at this scale, billions of times per second, but it never gets any farther. You cannot capture one nucleic acid and start to evolve from there. It doesn't work that way. This spud cell that this broad slapped together, let's call her Dr. fucking Frankenstein. Have scientists really made a living cell from scratch? Not quite. Created using 36 existing bacterial genes and this 110, 120 process lipid cell maintenance thing. Dr. Frankenstein has made a cell that is almost but not quite alive. And this is exactly what Dr. Frankenstein did. So no, she did not create life from scratch. Number two, I think it's interesting that they admit that it has to be created. But here's where the magic comes in. What has to happen is you have to go from a soup of loose chemicals. It has to percolate up through the cold ocean water. As the chemical environment changes nanosecond by nanosecond, the temperature changes nanosecond by nanosecond. And as these 100 quintillion collisions are happening every second, you must go from a brand new box of Legos to a fully functioning cell with apparently let's say 125 genes with ribosomes, ATP. That's not an electrochemical process. That's a mechanical process. ATP molecules are little springs, and they kick. And when they kick, they shove two molecules together, and sometimes you get a reaction. All this, you have to come up with a fat sack full of self-sustaining soup. You have to go from zero to a fully functioning, primitive, self-replicating bacterium in less than maybe 3 or 4 seconds. It doesn't evolve over 1 billion years. It evolves over the course of 3 or maybe 4 seconds if you're lucky. That whole thing. After the end of about 3 seconds, you must have a fully functioning cell that can survive the open ocean and evolve from there, or it's not going to happen. It has to happen in 3 seconds. It takes billions of years for space dust to accumulate amino acids to the quantity that you can rain them down on a planet for 250 million years until the magic happens. This is every teaspoon of what... Now, this is when the whole Earth is covered with volcanoes, basically. It's not underwater seepages, okay? Churning and churning and churning, but it's completely shrouded from the sun. So these amino acids have to rain down on these dust particles through all of this highly acidic atmosphere, and once they get close enough to be swallowed, you have to swallow all 130 genes at once. This all has to happen in about 3 to 4 seconds. And the only way it's possible is because you have a planet the size of Earth, which is a giant ocean, which is heated by these volcanic vents. It's swimming in pre-genetic material in the cosmic space dust. And this thing goes on and on and on for 250 million years at quintillions upon quintillions. It isn't one cell. You have to have a population of several hundred billion of these things all coming together out of the soup at the same second, or it's not going to work. But if you run this experiment planet-wide for 250 million years, apparently you get life. But that's what has to happen. People don't understand. You have to evolve a complete cell from nothing, just scratch parts, in about 3 seconds, or it won't happen. Because if it's not a fully functioning bacterium that can survive the open ocean and the conditions that existed at that time, it goes extinct instantly. This thing only lasts up to 3 seconds, and it can't reproduce without help. Animal husbandry. But that's what she's building. She's building cells that can produce particular hormones, or you don't have reverse engineering nature We've all seen the results of that. I only mention it because life is not only intelligent, it is the result of an intelligent design. Here's the funny thing. This only happens because of quantum mechanics. Whatever the actual laws are, the way the universe behaves is energy is not given up or absorbed on a continuum. Chunks are swallowed or spit out at one time. Different sized chunks. And this happens whenever two chemicals react in some way. The photons are absorbed or given off, but it has to be very specific chunks. So, for example, what's one of the molecules? It's not peptides. There's a very simple molecule that's constantly twisting itself. It constantly twists itself. But it can only do it in jumps. And when it does the jump, this is how it's all going on. This is how it's all going on. It's a soup of these things that are reacting against each other. Constantly. 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 Without stop. Without let up. And one of the things that happens is protein folding. It's not enough to have the genes and have the... It's not enough to know what the sequence of amino acids is. Scientists can make genes in their laboratory. What they can't make is proteins. Because what you have to have is, it's not enough. It's not even enough to apply one amino acid at a time to your string. It has to fold in just the right shape. And it can fold up. You know those magnetic toys you play with? It's like a snake or all those little tiles, and it can fold up. And there's a force there, and there's an organization there, but it's also, it can just screw up all kinds of ways. That's protein folding. That's what the ribosome does, right? It not only assembles the amino acids in the correct order, but it causes them to fold in just the right way. And it does this 1 billion times a second per cell. Without failure. And this thing had to appear, the common ancestor appeared 4.2 billion years ago and never went extinct. This is what you're up against, Dr. Frankenstein, and I salute her. I'm going to give her a standing ovation. I'm not going to give her a standing ovation. They tried this with DNA instead of DNA, and I haven't heard anything since, so you know they've probably built a Chuck E. Cheese on Mars by now. I only bring it up because it's a form of intelligence. And one of those intelligent things is quantum mechanics. If an atom could radiate energy continuously, if there wasn't this kind of a ratchet of some kind in place, if it wasn't for that, the entire universe would have frozen completely solid within the first 5 or 10 minutes of the Big Bang. I don't remember which one it is. Within 5 or 10 minutes of the Big Bang, the universe would have dropped to absolute zero and nothing would have ever happened after that. No chemical reactions, nothing would happen. Nothing would happen. The heat would be gone because it escapes at the speed of light and the atoms can't keep up with it. The heat would have been gone within 5 minutes, the temperature drops to absolute zero. Without quantum mechanics slowing down, just slowing down the cooling down of the universe, there would not be life. There's a molecule that's always twisting itself. It's always seeking comfort. And it makes life go. But every time a molecule comes, when water comes close to another molecule, and it changes the electrochemical configuration of this molecule for a second. Now all of a sudden it reacts with this molecule or whatever. Here's another thing. Water droplets don't form when two water molecules come together and kiss and give up a photon of heat. No. What has to happen is two water molecules and another molecule that's not a water molecule have to collide at the same time in a gaseous environment. It's so complicated. Why would you try? They have not built a cell from scratch for the first or the last time, but they are figuring out just how hard it is to build a cell. I only bring it up because I know one of these broads. I saw one of these broads when they came to Southern Illinois for a big ice brouhaha and called in a phony bomb threat to the hospital so they could go plant bombs out at the airport or do whatever in the hell. I happened to be driving into town and then coming out of town. And there was this old shitbox Chevy Suburban with Oregon plates and no doors on it. So it's like a troop transport. It can jump in and jump out. Transporting these protesters around and about, right? And it's just one person, and it's this young broad. I'm not going to say which one it is. I think I recognize one of these broads in this picture because she was driving like a bat out of hell. She was driving like she was raised on the set of the Dukes of Hazzard. She knew what she was doing, and just as cool as a cucumber. And the state trooper's hot on her ass. And I think it was one of these broads. Just so you know, I didn't see any guns or rocket launchers or Molotov cocktails. There were no doors on this goose. It was just a troop transporter with his old shitbox with Oregon plates, and this broad was just driving it like it was Thunder Road. Well, it looks like they caught up with her because they've all been sentenced to a minimum of 50 years each. They caught them in Texas. I only bring it up because speaking of DNA, Yvonne Missy Woods was appointed head of the DNA testing lab at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation in January of 1994, and apparently she's some complete and total fraud who has been taking shortcuts and screwing up cases. She was proven to have manipulated data in 654 cases. So she handled all the DNA in the JonBenet case. And I only bring it up because who was that other woman scientist that Jeffrey Epstein mentored into her job? And I don't just mean Dr. Eva Anderson. There was another one that AI uncovered. I'm going to have to dig into because he's all about DNA. He's all about human cloning. And have you seen pictures of this broad? I couldn't believe she'd been on the job that long. Are there any pictures of her when she was young? This is a good one. This is recent. Open image in new tab. She's at least as good looking as Eva Anderson. She a former model? Did she model her way through school on the pole? How'd she get that job? And how convenient was it that she showed up in that job right before the JonBenet thing hit the fan? Well, they were trying to, baby bull. Chiral molecules, Googled it. Maybe. Spud cells, maybe she's going for potatoes. It's a fat sack full of chemical processes. Ever see water organized under sound? You ever see water organized sound? There's a documentary you got to watch. It's for free right now on YouTube. Is it in the list? It's called Water is Stranger Than You Think. It's fun. It's profound. They got the right people to do it. And it starts off very gently. And then it goes, I'll tell you things about water you don't want to know. It's unbelievable. They finally figured out why ice is actually slick. And it's not what you think. This is actually rust. This is hydrogen rust. Hydrogen is a metal. It's unbelievable. But she did the DNA in the JonBenet case. Well, the only reason I bring that up is the FBI officially announced yesterday, the FBI determines Nancy Guthrie kidnapping notes to be fakes. None of the ransom notes are believed to be genuine, the FBI official told Reuters, speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss details of an active investigation. Why don't you just slap the cuffs on him yourself? Do you know what happens to leakers in the Trump administration? A second law enforcement source familiar with the matter confirmed the FBI assessment of the ransom notes. So the ransom notes are all fake. Days after Guthrie went missing, TMZ was among the first to report on an initial note demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin for her safe return. According to the outlet's founder, Harvey Levin, the note began by saying Guthrie was okay but scared. Levin said the letter included one detail that has not been reported, the placement of Nancy Guthrie's Apple Watch. That's why everybody said the ransom note was genuine. It also contained details about a broken floodlight. FBI Special Agent in charge of the Bureau's Phoenix office, Heath Jenke, said that the FBI is taking that note seriously. This is before. Okay, this was back February 7th. The note made mention of particular details, including an Apple Watch and a floodlight at Guthrie's house. The only people who could have known those details were law enforcement, and not that many law enforcement necessarily, and members of the family, because they were there on February 1st, including, but not limited to, Savannah and her brother. They're the ones who claimed the ransom note was real. The FBI has determined they were fake. So somebody who had access to this information about the Apple Watch and the broken floodlight, somebody wrote a phony ransom note. I only bring it up because somebody wrote a bunch of phony extortion letters to the San Francisco Chronicle taking credit for some murders that had nothing to do with each other until you find out later it had everything to do with their parents. The phony notes in the Son of Sam case. I only bring it up because Savannah is not only a crackerjack criminal attorney, but she's married to the guy who invented crisis management. And I only bring that up because I predicted this weeks ago that those notes would turn out to be fake. Because they contained information that the kidnapper would have known, but there was no kidnapper and he was never in the house. And so that information, the ransom note, could only have come from or been informed by either a member of law enforcement, and what would they have to gain by doing that? It was a very shoddy attempt. It's almost like he wanted to get caught. Because supposedly from this exact same, one of these articles says it, one of the exact same, the letter that had the information about the Apple Watch and the floodlight, that same IP address sent another email. These are not letters, emails. Sent another email saying that she had died and apologizing. From the same IP address. I just wanted to brag about being right all the time. Chiral molecules, well, I'm sure they belong in that class. There's a very particular molecule. It can't, it's always changing. Most molecules do, actually. Yeah, they show you these in science class. You know, you put these molecules together, they're very rigid. The bonds are hard to break, but they're all rubbery. All molecules are rubbery, and they change their configuration. But here's the thing, baby bull. I don't think it's a random hoax. When you find out who Savannah's family are, when you find out don't need wrist tattoos, don't need any of that. Okay. How's that for a free episode? Yeah, what are they going to do now? First, they said the ransom notes had to be genuine because it had information that nobody else knew except the kidnapper and the family and the law enforcement. So we know where the ransom note had to come from, right? If it's fake. Just like in the Zodiac case, it had to come from somebody who had access to the case materials. And all the members of the family were at the house. And apparently law enforcement never set foot in the house. So really, the only people who really knew where the Apple Watch was would be the family. And they went back to the scene after this ransom note came in. They went back to the scene and checked out the floodlight. They didn't even notice that. So really, I can't think of anybody but the family. I don't know what else to tell people. Now this is all if you believe anything the FBI tells you. I'm Professor Thomas Henry Horan, asking you to please stay plugged in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
He reads everything.
Speaking of reading everything, the Blob is digesting material. So I don't know if it'll be ready by Saturday the 4th, but it'll be ready to show you, and we'll be ready to ask it questions probably in a week or so. So stay plugged into the Stones Unturned podcast. Then you'll be able to give me your money and you'll be able to look at it for yourself. Oh yeah, she called Mark Kelly, yeah. Oh, that's exactly right, baby bull. All right, I'll see you guys very soon. Mwah. Put that wherever you want it.